Welcome to another episode of Point and Click, a Telltale podcast. I am Jordan C. Johnson.
And I am Adam Razak.
And today we are talking about the Season 2 finale of Telltale's The Walking Dead, No Going Back. Which I have mixed feelings about. Why don't you start us off here, because I'm curious to know where you stand on this one.
I think this is a great episode.
Okay.
Probably the most satisfying finale for me. One of the most in terms of everything Telltale has ever done.
More so than the first season?
I think so, just because the amount of ways it can end. Whereas, I love the ending to the first season, but in any case, that's going to be the ending you get. For me, Season 2's ending is better because it feels much more personalized based on what you want to do. Like, when I finally made that last decision as Clementine, the last couple of ones, I truly felt like, this was my story. This is how I wanted it to go. And I think it's one of those rare moments in a Telltale game where it actually does play out like how you want it to, rather than consistently course correct and go to something else or have it be this other way.
No, man. That's one of my biggest complaints about this episode. Although, to be fair, I don't know the alternate options for the ending, because I think I've only ever done it one way, even both times I played it.
Okay.
So, what exactly can change? In terms, can you wind up with Kenny?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that I've never seen.
There are basically three different... about maybe 5-6 different ways it can go. The big thing is, of course, whether you end up with Jane or Kenny, and whichever one dies, and you go from there. And then you can decide if you actually want to go with the person or go out on your own. And then you can decide from there if I think it's you want to stay in the city with Kenny or leave him and go with AJ, or it's like little things after that, but it's
Well, without spoiling anything, considering I haven't played it yet, I have a feeling Season 3 course corrects that pretty hard. Am I right in that?
Ugh.
I figured.
How
can they keep that up? How can they keep up those variables?
Yeah. That's the issue. That's probably why I felt better about the choice that I'd made with Season 2 going into Season 3. If Season 3 didn't exist, I would like a lot of the other choices, but the way they deal with Kenny or Jane being there is bullshit in either case.
Okay. Well, let's get to that. Let's start with the beginning here. So there's the shooting, you have to choose to save the baby and how to deal with Arvo. So, and this is, okay, I up until the last stretch, I thought this was a great episode. And I think most of this episode is still great. And I really think episodes 2 through most of this episode are the peak of Telltale for me. I feel like I go through so many different emotions about the different people in the group, and how I feel about different things, and it does a great job of stringing you along, and just when you think you feel one way, then you're not so sure anymore. Kenny was a prime example for me in this episode, because by the end of the last episode, I think I mentioned this, I was like, I'm done with Kenny. Don't want anything to do with this guy anymore.
Yeah. This
episode, I was a little more on his side a lot of the time, and I felt a little more. I felt like that bond with him coming back again a bit. And I think this is just all done through Telltale's masterful writing in this episode, where it's whether you're sitting out with him away from the fire talking about Duck and Katya, or changing his bandage, which all are these really great moments of bonding that kind of sneak up on you, and also, this may be somewhat of a controversial stance on this, but I tended to side more with him on the Arvo stuff than the other people in the group. Not completely, I wouldn't go about it the way he did necessarily, but their completely casual acceptance of Arvo was I did not, I barely even understood. I was like, are you guys insane? I don't know. So between all of that, I kind of kept going with Kenny, but of course, by the end of the episode, that all went out the window, and I have big problems with how certain parts of that play out.
I've always sided with Kenny like you said, up until the last part. Even like way earlier, like years ago when I played this, I was always with him, and I really never really minded it when he would like brutalize Arvo, especially when Arvo would trick them into going across the river, which ends in Luke's death. And it's like yeah, I'd kick the shit out of him too, because he led us into this not exactly an ambush, but into an even worse situation than we were currently.
Right.
So
and then his whole like going to like telling Kenny "fuck you" after all this, like
yeah.
really no, like fuck you.
Yeah.
I know. I am not on his side. I think part of it also may just be that I'm not entirely sure how old he's supposed to be. Like, they keep calling him a kid and everything, but it never really comes across in the game how old he actually is, which I think kind of throws it a bit. Like, I mean, if the kid is supposed to be like 15 or something, that's kind of a different story, but I can't really tell how old he doesn't seem that young to me.
No, he seems like 19, 20, I'd say.
Yeah, he seems like Ben, I guess, but even Ben seemed younger than he did, honestly.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So, I don't know. That feels like a little bit of missing context, but it's not a huge deal. Either way, this guy has, like, fucked the group over so many times and proven himself untrustworthy so many times that, like, yeah, I have no sympathy.
I just think the way... If I have any big complaint about this episode, it's just the way they get Arvo buddy-buddied with Mike and Bonnie. If Bonnie can survive the walk across the ice. And I've never liked the way that goes, because
it seems out of character, or
yeah, it's like, why would... I know Mike and Bonnie don't like Kenny, but for Bonnie to help the guy that made them cross the ice, which ends with Luke's death. Like, there's some implication that Bonnie and Luke were maybe a romantic pairing at one point, and she's clearly still maybe really attracted to him. I just don't get why Bonnie especially would want to escape with Arvo, with Arvo's actions leading to Luke's death. It's never has made sense to me.
Yeah. And, I mean, this is jumping ahead a bit, but I officially, by the end of this, fucking hated Bonnie again, completely. Because, to me, I mean, she's completely wrong in that ice scenario. As far as I can tell, like, look, okay, there's a lot of blame thrown around unjustly in this episode, which I think is one of the interesting things about it. Like, everybody is so caught up on blaming everyone else that there's no rationality anymore. Everybody wants to blame someone for everything, even when really almost none of this is anyone's fault. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a shitty situation and bad stuff happens and you can't really control it. If I'm going to assign blame to anyone in this situation, it's Bonnie's terrible decision to walk over to Luke. Like, do you understand the physics of how ice works? Like, why would you put more weight on the ice to help him? It makes no sense at all. Like, she basically ends up breaking the ice, and by doing that, basically killing Luke. And then she blames me for that?
Yeah.
Like, and another classic Blue Balls Telltale moment where you're not allowed to respond to her when she tells you that stuff, which I don't know why Telltale does that stuff. Why do you not give me the option to say, hey, Bonnie, go fuck yourself? Because that's what that's all I wanted to say the whole time. Like, you're done with me? Are you fucking kidding me? No, like, that whole last sequence is just endless blue balls for me. Like, that was bad enough, but the fact that you're not allowed to shoot when Arvo has a gun on you and they're stealing the truck and supplies? No.
Okay. That I agree.
Shit. You should have been able to shoot, like, all of them right there. That is such bullshit.
That I will give you.
And why not? Because, I mean, they're gone either way, and you take the truck either way. And, like, Clementine being shot doesn't really play into anything, so why couldn't you shoot them? I don't understand. Like, it makes no sense. There's no reason for it.
It's... Again, maybe just budgetary constraints or whatever, but it's that whole bit was just completely unsatisfying, nonsensical. Right. I do not. I don't like that. Really that stretch with like the house, I don't like. Like any of that shit with like inside the house to the point where they're back on the road. I'm like, this to me is easily like the weakest point out of the whole episode. I
because
love the episode. It's just just
but
that part.
it just begins the problems with the rest of the episode, where not once did I feel like I could respond in the way I wanted to in any of those situations till the end of the episode, with the exception of choosing to let the people in or not. Everything between the house and that, I just felt like completely neutered from making decisions. You know what I mean? And like pointlessly so. I really can't figure out exactly why Telltale doesn't allow you to respond in certain ways. Like, it's so weird because there are moments at the end of this episode where you're dealing with Jane and Kenny, and basically all three response options are variations of the same emotion. And I'm like, seriously? You couldn't give me one choice? Like, the whole, like, when you find the baby alive in the car at the end, right? And every option is either some variation of how could you, what happened, what, like, the baby's alive, it's shocking. Like, why am I only allowed to respond that way? Why am I only allowed to respond as if, like, Jane did something horrible? Why is my only choice at the end, I'm not going with you, or I forgive you? Why is there an option for, I don't really think you did anything wrong? Because I don't really, like, I'm on Jane's side with that whole end. I don't understand why I'm forced into this outrage that I don't feel. It's very strange.
I don't really think I think you can go that route where there's really, like, no outrage. Like, you can tell her,
But
like,
only
I
by
can't believe the
choosing
baby is
silence.
alive. No, you can tell her, like, oh, I can't believe the baby's alive, and then Jane will, like, beg for your forgiveness, and
Exactly.
you can just be like, yeah, there's nothing wrong.
No, you
It's
can't.
fine.
You can't. The
You
only
can.
option you have is to say, I forgive you. That's the
Yeah.
only option. That is not
I
the
think
same
that's-
thing because there's nothing to forgive her for. Like, it's just like this weird, that whole end.
Well, it's
like,
a way of making her feel better. I don't think it's a way of, like, expressing really what Clementine is feeling, because it's
but
a way
they're
of
trying to force you into that shock the whole time. Even with the way Kenny, like, Jane is dealing with Kenny, you have to, like, everything is all capitals, like Jane or Kenny or whatever. Like, why can't you just be, like, coolly on her side the whole time? I don't understand why they don't give you the option. And again, it's another case where it doesn't really serve any narrative funneling purpose, because by the end of the episode, you can just be with Jane and Kenny be dead. So why can't I go like a straight line to that outline by saying, I agree with you in every way, Jane, and I don't want anything to do with Kenny the whole time, instead of this like forced outrage and like this shock at this situation that is completely understandable and not shocking at all. And like the same thing with like when he's in the car and you can leave, and I just feel like they don't give you any choice. They're like so set in this idea that like the player is going to be outraged by Jane's pragmatism that they don't. I never felt like I had any satisfactory choices in that finale. I wasn't happy with anything I could make Clementine do.
I don't agree at all. I think like you can be on Jane's side the whole time. I mean, up until like the point where you're given that choice to like shoot her or shoot Kenny or let her be stabbed. It's like, I remember like that first time I played through it, I did get the sense that I was on her side completely, and even though like they wouldn't recognize it, it's like you were still voicing that concern. But I think the point of like having these like very vague outbursts is that you are supposed to feel like you are completely helpless over this situation.
But it's not that I feel helpless over the situation. It's that I feel like I have no choice to make the character I've been playing as this whole series respond in the way that my character would respond. And
I think there's enough. I think there's enough dialogue for like both sides.
Isn't.
If you just want to tell
But
Kenny
there isn't.
to shut up or Jane to shut up, it's like I think there is.
What if I don't want what if I don't want Kenny to shut up, but I want to be like just supporting Jane? Like there are options to do that, but I had to choose silence way too often in this episode because I didn't agree with any of the choices in the dialogue. And there were multiple times where like seriously all three options are variations of the same response, which to me is just ridiculous. I don't understand why that would ever happen in a branching game. Like again, especially one where the narrative is going to can end up with you in favor of one side. So why do I have to be outraged? Why do I have to act like I don't know, like this baby stuff is a big deal when like really I'm completely on her side for everything she's doing. You know what I mean?
I understand. I just don't feel like they restrict you too much, like one way or another. I think like what they provide for, like in my opinion, I think is enough for if you want to be on Jane's side or if you want to be on Kenny's side.
Yeah, but I
or
mean,
if you just want to be like fuck
just...
these people and just like back away from both of them, which
Right.
that's the path that I just ended up doing. Like you both need to shut the fuck up.
Yeah, but see, I think it depends on how we're the difference in our feelings about what's happening. Because
Sure.
I think you're right. Like if you are a little more middle of the road and like you're saying that you feel sort of like both these people should shut the fuck up. Like if you're on that side, then yes, there are definitely options that you can do to go down the middle. But like for me, I was hard on Jane's side by the end. Like I wanted no
Okay.
I didn't have any measured nature like in my response. I was just like, yep, agree, agree, agree. So like the fact that I never, and that's what I'm saying. Like the game should give you a choice. Like you should be able to go down the middle, go with Kenny, go with Jane, and you can eventually wind up with Jane. But a lot of it is through inaction and no response, and it just doesn't make sense to me when you have 3 dialogue options. Why isn't one more on the side of like how I'm reacting to this? Like I think that's the problem. It just should come down to choice and having the options available so that the player feels satisfied with their responses. Like I think that's part of the whole idea of like what a branching dialogue driven game is going to do. Like I'm sure that I'm sure that you did feel satisfied with how you could respond, but I didn't feel satisfied with how I could respond. And the whole point of a game like this is that shouldn't be happening. You know what I mean? Like there shouldn't be one player who's like who feels like they're not getting the right options. You know what I mean? Like the whole point of having different choices is that everybody should be able to, or almost everybody should be able to feel as if their feelings on this are represented in the options. And I just did not get that from this.
Which that's is fair. I understand where you're coming from. That I won't argue against because I do think there needs to be more options.
Yeah.
For all these games in general, which is why I think the like it's like the 4-button layout. That. I think that needs to go. Like that's not that to me is especially playing it on PC because I'm seeing how consoles and like a lot of the mobile stuff has like really hindered their ability to make different options for this stuff or the ways you can react because really like what you've got is just 4 buttons and a timer, so it's like you can't be like scrolling down these dialogue choices when like there's a timer going on,
right?
Because that will take forever and that will just like ruin the whole pacing of the game. But I guess there is some kind of it's a risky compromise trying to figure out like the most streamlined approaches for these situations, which like in this case for you is not going to turn out well with what you wanted to do.
I agree with you, but I still kind of feel like I don't know if the problem with the choices in this episode are that they don't have enough they don't have enough room to give you more options. They just need to diversify the space they have a little more. Like I just feel like so much of it is just again the kind of variations on the same theme, you know. And I mean this is really something that's been a problem with a lot of Telltale games as we've kind of discussed. It's really just a more like a smaller form of narrative funneling, and I don't know and like. In a situation like this, where, like I said, the outcome can still happen where you're with Jane and Kenny's dead. So, as far as I can tell, the only reason for this to happen, because there's really there really shouldn't be any budgetary or technological restraint issue there, because you're still winding up in the same place. And still in the same amount of time and choices. It really just feels like Telltale, genuinely doesn't think that any player is going to feel differently about this. And that seems like a big problem for me. Like, it seems like they think this whole thing Jane is doing with the baby and everything is so outrageous that surely everyone is going to feel some level of outrage about this deception that she's doing. When, if you don't feel that, that's when I'm just like, did they just not consider that somebody may feel differently about this? I mean, I've said in the last couple episodes already that I'm already, since from the beginning, I've been skeptical of this baby situation and if this is the smartest thing, situation to be putting ourselves in as a group. And like at the beginning too, when you have to choose to save the baby or run for cover, like I just ran for cover, and I don't know, like it just seems like a really bad idea right now in this world. So I don't know. It's the same. It's like the same thing they did when Jane confronts Rebecca and asks about possibly having an abortion, and you're not really given an option to be like, yeah, Jane's kind of right. Like you can be silent and you can kind of walk down the middle, but you're never really given any other choice, which again feels weird. It's just like, do they just think that nobody's going to agree with Jane on any of this stuff? It's just, I don't know. It's very strange. It really feels like it strips a lot of my agency away. And I mean, that's something Telltale, like we've complained about in other episodes. It's just a smaller form of it, I think.
Yeah.
And this is something we'll get into a lot with Tales from the Borderlands, but we'll save that for when we get there.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think it's a different kind of problem where it's more an assumption of like what Telltale wants you to feel rather than because like a lot of like the narrative funneling, it's basically just I'd chalk it up to a lot of like budgetary constraints and lack for time. The fact that they're dealing with an outdated engine that desperately needs to be like scrapped and rebuilt. Yeah. But I think this is more of a case of maybe pride, where they've written this story, and I mean, and to elaborate again, like I love the way this episode goes, personally, but I can see where you're coming from regarding the frustration of not being able to react in this like totally unique way that might be outside of the realm of thinking on Telltale's behalf, where they want you. It's like they've created this story and they're so proud of it, and they're like, wow, this writing is so good, and everyone's gonna feel exactly the way we do. But it's like, it's like that's not how this works. That's why like you need to like give more options, not just like narrative wise, but like player response wise.
Yes.
Something
like,
and then create more out of that even.
Exactly. Like it feels like they're so wrapped up in their own narrative of how this is playing out that I really feel like they lose sight of the fact that not every player is going to feel the same way about these events. Like, and I feel like that's where the options get lost. And like this, it's like the same thing when you're not allowed to shoot at Arvo, right? I feel like the only outcome I can think of in my, like, the only reason for that, because again, like I said, they still leave the group and they still take the truck regardless, right? The only thing that makes sense to me about why that scene would have no option for that is that they want the shock moment of Clementine being shot, which I think is shitty. Like, I mean, I get it. That's a shocking moment, sure, but why is it the only one? Like, again, the whole point of a branching game like this is to have other options. Certain scenes that you may be really proud of should not be seen by everyone if a game truly is a branching narrative. And that's fine. It should play out that way. So to not give me any choice when every part of me, like when I'm watching them try to leave, is like, no, I'm going to shoot now. Especially like when he pulls a gun on you, that should be it. Like that should be, I was like, no, done. Pull the trigger. Why are we even hesitating? I haven't been on Arvo's side this whole time, and now they're going to take him over the rest of the group and steal all our supplies and transportation? No, like, it's over. Why? But they don't give you that choice, just like they don't let you tell Bonnie to fuck off. Like, it's just a bizarre lack of agency. That it really just feels like they're caught up in their own feelings about the narrative, and they're caught up in their own writing, and they want you to see things that, like you said, they're proud of. But which is fine, but it's not fine in a game where, you should have choices.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you on that. It's just I'm with you on the. I think we differ on where the story goes in terms of how we feel about it or not, but philosophically regarding like the creation of this episode is where we agree.
Okay.
Like the design philosophy behind it, I think is where I can get on board with what you're saying with that. Because I've seen it in not just this series, but like it's gotten worse. But
God,
it's gotten a lot. It's not in. It's I mean, in other series, it's
Sure.
gotten worse. Like Batman, it's probably the worst I've
Right.
ever seen. Minecraft is fucking awful in some cases.
It's really strange that like they seem to be getting worse as the technology should be getting better. Like it's like they're not. It's like they're learning in the opposite direction from what they're doing.
Well, I hate to use this word, but they're casualizing it. Where if you don't, they're not these games. They have this, and that's what's frustrating. Like they have certain areas where they do have a glimpse of like the older Telltale, like the season, like Walking Dead season 1, Wolf Among Us Telltale, where you've got like the really heavy thematic stuff that really makes you think. You go over it in your head, and it's fascinating material. But the way a lot of these episodes play out, it feels like they're being made for people that will only play through them once, which I feel is a mistake. Like these episodes are designed to be only played once. It's like you buy the season pass, you play them, and then that's the end of it. But it's like, what if you want to go more? What if you want to
Right.
what if you want to try to see everything that the game has to offer? And then you really just, like me, you start to see how really limited in vision these guys
Sure.
are.
Right,
When
and it's like you said, like I mean, I'm sure there are budgetary constraints, but it's
Yeah.
also like Telltale in a way that feels in a way to me that like other like companies that make branching games like this don't necessarily feel most of the time, where it really feels like I've been saying, like they're so caught up in this one experience and this one version of a scene they really like,
Yeah.
that like they can't seem to wrap their heads around the idea of closing off options to certain players.
Yeah.
Which is a huge problem when your game is supposed to go in different directions by design. Like they tell you every time, like this game adapts to the choices you make and changes based on how you play. You know what
Yeah,
I
it's
mean?
bullshit.
Like it's bullshit. Like
Yeah.
the whole if that were true, then why are there not like entire sections of narrative and events that I may never see if I only play the game once? That should be fine. You guys you should be comfortable with that as a like a developer of games like this. I feel like you have to be if you're going to make games like this and be successful and be like artistically successful. But it just doesn't go that way. Like they just time and time again, they want you. They so want certain scenes to be seen by everyone that it seems like they just can't bring themselves to close it off. Either that, or it just never even occurs to them to close it off. But like that you have to be willing to do that to make a game like this good and lasting.
Yeah, well, I wish they would just encourage, because I remember a long time ago when Heavy Rain was coming out, which is the PS3 murder mystery game. I remember the director saying something along the lines of, "This game is only meant to be played once," and I'm like, that's odd to hear that coming from someone who's made this game where there's like multiple different endings and everything. And like when I played it, and I like recently, and I realized finally like why he said that is because it is very limited in vision, because a lot of it does course correct, and I feel like that's philosophy applies to most of what Telltale does nowadays.
See, I think I feel like in theory I understand what he's saying. It's David Cage, right? He's the one who was talking about it.
Yes.
Okay. I think in theory I understand that in theory, and I think what he's trying to say is that how this story plays out for you should be the way this story plays out. And I think that goes into certain things I love with especially in the first season of Walking Dead, that's something that really struck me is and Wolf Among Us is the feeling of regret and the feeling of making a choice that as soon as you do it you like, oh, that was not a good choice, and not necessarily because it like affected you and your story negatively, but just because you just like morally or emotionally or whatever just don't feel good about what you just did. And I think what Cage is getting at is that you shouldn't feel like you can course correct. Like if you make a choice like, well, next time I'll just do that differently so I can fix it. I think that's kind of more what he's trying to say. And like this idea that part of the like the drama and the art of a game like that is that you should feel like you should live in the consequences of your choices. You know what I mean? So if essentially if you're just looking at a game as a game where you can play it over and over again and see all the different choices, I feel like that's going to kind of that sort of weight can evaporate a bit if you're kind of losing yourself in the game nature of it. But I get what you're saying too, though. Like, I mean, it also just might mean that perhaps the game is a bit limited. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure he didn't mean to say like he doesn't want people to see that it's limited.
Sure.
But I think Telltale is a problem with this. Like, playing through this and for this podcast, and hearing you talk about the other outcomes and how they play out, I think really has sort of altered my perception of Telltale a bit, because because I've only played the Telltale games once, all of them. And when you have that first playthrough, generally it tends to be a pretty good impression on most of their best games.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there are flaws, as we've discussed, but for the most part, it's a positive reaction, because you're like, wow, that was intense and dramatic, and I got whatever I got out of it. But you start to go back, and it's like, wait a minute, like, these choices aren't really choices, especially hearing things like, like the ridiculous alternate outcome of Sarah if you save her. Like, why even do this? This isn't a choice. Like, this really isn't meaningful. Like, I mean, the weird, and it's such like a weird line. I was actually just having this discussion with my brother, because we've been playing Mass Effect Andromeda simultaneously. So we've been texting each other back and forth a lot as we're going through it. And we had this discussion where there's one moment in a mission on this where there's like this dangerous figure, right? And you get an interrupt option as he's like threatening one of your squad mates with a gun to... If you want to shoot him or not. You can choose to shoot him or choose to not shoot him and continue the discussion. So both of us went with the interrupt and shot him in the head, which resulted in the squad mate he was threatening being very like disappointed and frustrated with you because he didn't want you to do it and whatever. And then he gives you this whole spiel after you do that about how shooting this guy is going to turn him into a martyr, and how now his cause is going to be bolstered, and it's going to be what you've done has made this so much worse, right? Now, we had this discussion of where my brother loved this and felt bad about it and was like, I love that I'm regretting this. And for me, it was more like, I don't know if I like the way this played out. And the reason why is because the only real consequence of this in the game is that the character tells you that this is going to have a bad effect, right? But you never see that. That never plays out in the game. Like, you see how what you did bolstered his cause. It's never actually played out. So to me, that's just like phantom information. And it's sort of like, if the game doesn't follow through on that feeling, how valid is the feeling? And that's kind of what comes down to like the art of these games. Like my brother was from the side of the art, like the meaning of that decision and the art of it comes in how you feel about it based on how the character reacts to it. But for me, I'm like, I don't know if that's necessarily true, because I don't really if I don't really agree with the characters the way he chooses to feel about my decision, the only thing that's going to really make that have weight and consequence is if you see the consequences. If the game follows through on that threat and you see, oh shit, now things are worse. You know what I mean? But the game doesn't do that. So it's just kind of like this phantom thing that just kind of dissipates, and I never thought about it again. And it's sort of like, where does the alternate options in the game like this, like, where do those actually matter? How much does it matter based on the emotions you feel the first time? Is it, I don't know. Like, it's a different it's different from like criticizing a movie, because a movie is going to play out the same way every time you watch it. So you can, criticize different things in that movie and notice different things and feel how you feel about it. But a game like this, if there are other options that either exist or don't exist, if you only play it once, do those matter? If you play it more than once, does that mean the game is worse now that you're seeing that? I don't know. We're kind of in like uncharted territory with games as art in that way. We haven't really had a medium that follows that same path. I feel like it's kind of it's kind of new territory. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how I feel about it.
Well, I haven't played Andromeda. Well, I haven't played to that point, but I get what you're... I can see what you're talking about.
Right, like it's kind of a new field, right? I mean,
Yeah.
what other art form has this kind of limitation and possibility? And what does it matter? Like, I mean, like if you only play these games once and they're great games because you don't see the holes, and then
Yeah.
you play it again and it seems worse because now you see that your options are limited. Does
Yeah.
that negate the impact of the first time? Does that make the game worse artistically? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. It's a very gray area. I mean, I know that I feel somewhat less impressed and enthused, like seeing those limitations now, going through it again.
It's deflating for me.
It is, but at the same time, it's like I don't know. I don't know. Like when those flaws are based on repeat playthroughs that you're gonna have different. I don't know. Like it's so different than any other art form that it's just like a really hard. I don't know. I just don't know where to stand on that right now. It's definitely interesting to me. I just don't know exactly. I don't know. Like I guess we need to wait for the genre to mature and have more, new experiences. Hopefully. I mean, I don't know. I feel like I need to sit with that for a while. I'm not sure how I feel about it.
I think for me is if you're going to go through the effort of trying to, because like every time that like that title card comes up, like, oh, your choice is bad, or this game is designed to revolve around how you play. I feel like if you're going to make that bold of a statement, to, put that out there in people's minds, it's like I feel like you should make more of an effort to actually have different, not only just different like narrative paths, but like ways to respond to it, different scenes that you don't see, stuff like that. Like there's a whole bit in Witcher 3 where if you fuck up this one part, you can miss out on like this entire like heist mission that you can do potentially.
Right.
Like it's this like completely like weird trippy little thing, and it's really cool, but you can miss it if you make the right choice. And like the amount of time and effort they must have put into to make that scene with like the dialogue and all the stuff that happens, and it's like that's great. I love knowing that something like that exists in the code and that's actually there for me to miss. But when I'm just seeing what is basically just like a diorama of like all these like false options and like drop doors and stuff like that, it's like to me that's when, and we've talked about this with like the illusion of the game before. I don't mind it if the illusion is compelling initially, and like even some cases like the first season of The Walking Dead, I'll replay them over and over again, but I will still get things out of like the little choices they make back then. And I understand it more back then because that was when this series like really got thrust into the spotlight again. Like that was season 1. And I got it back then. But now that we've had almost it's been like almost 7 years now, 7 years that we've been getting this stuff, it's almost like it's time to move on. It's and for me, I just don't. And I feel like it's sad, like when I get like an actual choice in the third season of The Walking Dead. And I feel like it actually made a difference, and I go, wow, that's something great. And I go, yeah, but that should be the case with all of them.
Right.
It's
and I'm like, for me, like I look at. First of all, I do look at video games as a new art form. Like they're a whole new frontier for art. But I do also think that specifically, like games like Mass Effect and the Telltale games, The Witcher 3, these like decision-based, branching narrative games are in and of themselves also like a new art form, even separate from other games.
Yeah.
And it's something that like ever since I played the first Mass Effect and the first Walking Dead, like I've been excited about. I'm like, this is the future of art. I'm so excited to see where this goes. And ever since I first played that Mass Effect in like 2007 or 2008 or whatever the hell it was that I first played it, I kind of feel like I'm still waiting. Like I'm still waiting for the form to evolve and do something new. I like ever since those like the Walking Dead and Mass Effect 1, I'm not sure I've seen a new one that I felt like, wow, this is a step forward. I haven't done anything like this before. I feel like disappointingly it's becoming a formula. Like I feel like money's gotten involved, and now we're at this place where it's just like they're being just kind of cranked out and nobody's innovating, and it's just kind of the same thing over and over, and we're getting to the point where we're already relying on tropes, and it's like, seriously, this is so not the direction I was hoping this was gonna go.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much potential, and nobody is taking it forward, and it's so disappointing because I feel like the potential is limitless, and they're just, I just feel like they're just kind of making games. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, even the announcements of these games has become formulaic.
Yeah.
It's like your Latter-day Simpsons episodes where it's like, oh, what special guest are we gonna have this week? And now it's like, what property is Telltale gonna have this year? And it's not just one, it's two, maybe even three, and it's just.
Yeah,
It's
even like with like Mass Effect Andromeda, like it's gone in such the opposite direction of what I want. It's like, you guys have not gone forward at all. Like you've added more annoying like video game tropes into this. Like the second, I was looking forward to Mass Effect Andromeda and have been the whole time. But like one thing early on that like immediately made me nervous was when they mentioned that like, okay, like Dragon Age Inquisition and a lot of other games have this feature where you can do like they're called like in Mass Effect Andromeda they're called like strike team missions, where basically you just go to a computer console and send a team to go do a task, and as you're playing the time counts down and then you get a reward.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so that's something that was never in Mass Effect before, but it was in Dragon Age, and then they announced early on that like Mass Effect Andromeda was going to have this feature. And I remember playing when I finished Dragon Age Inquisition. One of the first things I thought of was, "Wow, all those little missions I sent those teams on were completely fucking pointless. Like, what a waste of time! Like, what a distraction that was. Totally like uninteresting. Nothing new. Like nothing that adds to the experience. It just takes time. It's just busy work. Yeah. And I feel like that's what got added. It became more of a video game than the first two Mass Effect games. All the features they added and kept and changed were all for the worst. Like, it just feels like everything just feels like work. Like, there's nothing new that feels like artistically intuitive or insightful or exciting or like revolutionary. Like so much of the first three games like felt like so exciting to me. I was so excited about all the different things that they were doing, and I was like, this is great, and we're gonna keep going forward. But now it's like they didn't just stop; they went backwards. It's become like this, like just this sort of stale commercial experience with no like innovation, which is just a goddamn tragedy when like there's so many possibilities you could be doing.
That's what happens when you rush a game out the door.
But like, I mean, I think it's more than that. It's just rushing.
I'm being facetious.
I mean, that's definitely part of it. Don't get me wrong. The game is a rushed mess, but it's just like, I feel like the people who are creating these games are not coming from the right place, and I think part of it is that I mean, I hate to say this, but I feel like, I mean, it makes sense that game development companies are going to be staffed with people who love video games and technology and like this nerdy stuff, and that's fine, and I get it. But I'm not sure those are the kind of people who are going to push it forward as an art form that's going to do exciting things and innovate. You know what I mean? Like that, I don't think like game developers are necessarily the right place to look for that in general. Like, I'm generalizing, obviously, but you know what I mean? Like, it's not necessarily the I'm not sure they're going to be the people that are going to be on like the cutting edge of the art world. You know what I mean?
Well, I think
obviously there are exceptions. I don't want to like just cast a huge net here and just like disparage everyone making games, but generally,
I think the case with companies like EA, I think it more or less
that's a big part of this.
Yeah. With my theory with how Mass Effect Andromeda went down is how I think initially they were going to go for something maybe you liked, but then, you know, the creator of Mass Effect himself left BioWare. You have like all these different like higher ups that worked on the previous trilogy leaving. So what you have left is just the grunts, and then they promote a grunt within there who maybe doesn't have enough experience to handle something like this, or maybe doesn't have the same passion for Mass Effect to like push it forward. Like I forget his name, the creator, I forget his name, but. And then you have EA coming in and like bossing them around and telling them they need to put really like generic gamey stuff into it just to get the development going. And I've heard rumors that like a lot of this was outsourced. Like BioWare themselves didn't work on a lot of like the facial animations, which has all been a big problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's been and a lot of people at EA, and I hate to say it, and this may be generalizing as well, hyperbole. They don't give a fuck about video games.
Yeah.
Like a lot of them don't. A lot of them come from like packaged goods. Like I remember hearing one of the guys that runs Nintendo now. He worked at Pizza Hut before for going into Nintendo, and it's like these people from all these different kind of markets come in that really don't have the experience and just see
Right.
like the most homogenized stuff and go, that's what we want. That's what's going to make this game better.
Right.
And
Like
it's
I remember when like the TV channel AMC was like a channel that actually showed movies, like movies that were complete and like didn't have commercials, and it was a cool channel. You could see interesting stuff. And then like they got taken over, and like, well, we're losing out on so much money not having commercials, and why do we care about showing all these movies nobody wants to see? And let's start making original shows, and like, and now it's just a shithole channel like every other fucking channel. But you know what I mean? Like it's the same kind of thing. Like the people who are running this stuff are, you know, not necessarily interested in the art of it. And you know, this is a story as old as the fucking planet. Like this is just how art works when money is involved, and that's just how it is. And I'm not going to go on a tirade against that because it's pointless. That's just how society works.
Well, you and I have had this debate before where we I've set this like differentiation between art and product when I feel like
Right.
I feel like
Which I don't agree with.
sure, but my take on it is like when you start messing around with it and you start like distilling the vision of other people, that's when I think it crosses that line into product, when like they just want to push it out there. And sure, like the product itself can be viewed as art, but I think from a philosophical, psychological perspective, the way that I'm seeing it being treated, I think it really just dilutes the whole thing and just makes just this like ugly, cold thing instead of this like passionate experience.
But I feel like this is the same argument people make about music and movies and whatever else I've heard tons of times. Where you know, it's like, you know, well, you know, a blockbuster Transformers movie is not art in the same way like an independent movie would be. Which, like the second I hear that, which I think is complete bullshit. Like it's not true. I don't think you can make any like art is completely, and I'm a firm believer in art as subjective. I don't think there's any objectivity involved in art criticism. Like I don't think it's possible. I think you're deluding yourself if you think it's possible to have an objective reaction to any kind of art. So I think I don't think you can take the creation of a work of art into consideration in any kind of meaningful or relevant way when you're taking in the final product. Like, look, Mass Effect Andromeda is a mess that clearly EA is a notoriously corporate company that notoriously doesn't treat their developers very well and doesn't really seem to care about the games at all and just wants to get deadlines and money and whatever. They're infamous for that. I don't think this is any news to anyone.
No.
And obviously that process is a problem when you're making a piece of art. But I really don't think that matters when you're looking at the final piece of art. Like the thing we were talking about before about this was No Man's Sky. Yeah. And the false advertising claims. And it's sort of like I get uncomfortable with that kind of distinction because that to me is an argument against video games as art. That is turning video games into a consumer product, which look, I mean, a video game, a blockbuster movie, an album that's going to sell 1 million copies, whatever. I mean, and yes, they are commercial products. Consumers can buy them, and money is exchanged, and companies make money. Sure, by definition, they are. But they are also works of art. And I think when you're talking about like criticizing them and how they affect you and how you feel about what's contained in them and the experience, I'm not comfortable talking about them in that realm of false advertising based on what you get in a work of art. Like it feels like a very weird way to treat them, and especially as someone who does view video games unequivocally as art, and something that should be treated as art, and I think is something that the only reason it's not respected is just because it's new. I mean, every new art form goes through this, but it feels counterintuitive to me to like approach it in those kind of developmental terms. Like I think it's you can look at the development and say, well, this is why certain things suck or whatever, but that's not really that important to me. Like the important thing is, well, how does it affect the experience as a work of art? So like when I talk about the EA stuff and the Rush stuff affecting Mass Effect Andromeda and negatively, I'm not talking about it as because, well, they claimed I would be able to do this and now I'm mad because I can't do this. Like, I don't care about that. All I care about is the bad stuff in this game takes me out of the artistic experience. It makes it less artistically interesting. And that's like the bottom line for me.
Mm-hmm. For me, you and I definitely think differently regarding this, but I think, and I said this earlier with the whole, when I think of it philosophically, like to me, it distorts it to being, like it ruins the art form for me when I see a development team and I see the people behind it treat it with such disrespect, which is, I think that's what for me No Man's Sky was about. And to be fair, like that whole thing with the whether or not they had the final features in the trailers, like that does not impact my view of the game. I still think it's a shit game not aside from that, but I feel like in terms of it being like art versus a product, I think, and I do see it as a work of art, but at the same time, it's like the way they just extensively put out all this like false information about it, like outright have lied about what's in it. It's like I get uncomfortable just thinking about it, because it's like where does that line stop? And for me, it's that line is there when the creators themselves actively disrespect what it is, like when they just want to push it.
But that shouldn't. But that's still right. I mean, that shouldn't be like a factor in discussing the quality of the game itself.
No. I agree, and that's what I'm saying. Like my thoughts on its the way they marketed it do not at all reflect how I feel about it. It's still terrible, even if they would have marketed it with everything that's in it. It's just that other discussion of whether or not it's...
So really, it's less of a problem with the game being disrespected as a work of art by its creators, and more of a problem with like ethics in the advertising almost.
That as well. Like that's a big part of it as well. But I just like, for me, like when I see a game like I guess like Mortal Kombat X is like one of the more recent examples. When I see them taking, like the most iconic thing out of it, like fatalities, and then cheapening it by having like these easy fatality microtransaction tokens, and it's like, I feel like that to me is like such a disrespect of the legacy of that series, that it stops being like it. To me, it just makes it more cold than having like this really like fun experience with it.
Right, but that's what I'm saying, though. But if it's affecting your feelings about the actual work of art, like, isn't that like that to me seems like a problem? Like, why is the way the creators are treating it affecting your feelings about it as a work of art? Like, for me, this would be like saying that like let's say a movie comes out that you think is a beautiful movie, whatever. Like, I think the movie Virus is an awesome movie, and people hate it. Okay, whatever. Like,
I don't even know what that is.
It's this like a sci-fi horror movie from 1998 with Jamie Lee Curtis and one of the Baldwin brothers. Whatever. I get it. People hate it. I think the movie is like an awesome sci-fi horror movie. I love it. But Jamie Lee Curtis has gone on record saying Virus is the worst piece of shit ever made. You know what I mean? And it's sort of like, if I went into that movie and thought, Jamie, like one of the people involved heavily with this movie, disrespects it and thinks it's garbage and doesn't care about it and whatever. Like, I don't feel like I really feel like that should not even be like in my head as I'm taking in this work of art. You know what I mean? Like so, for example, like the Mortal Kombat X thing. If you just have a problem as you're playing it with the idea, like it's frustrating that you have microtransactions, like taking away this feature that's iconic. Well, the problem there is, it doesn't seem like a problem to me is that the creators are being disrespectful to this game as a work of art, but that you're being removed from this work of art because this like problematic elements of it exist within the work of art. You know what I mean?
Well, I feel like with the whole like the Virus comparison, it's that, I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis may hate it, but I don't feel like her opinion of the movie affected the movie in any way, like in terms of how it was written, how it was directed. Like if people think it's a great movie, I mean, I don't think the fact that she hated it should not take away from people that like love it. Like if someone were to walk up to me and say like, hey, this game is great, and I go, I don't agree, I don't expect them to go, well because you don't like it, now I don't like it. Like to me that's silly. But when I see like with the Mortal Kombat X thing, with knowing the history of Warner Bros. And how they've treated games in the past, it's like I've seen the way they like hobble, like they gimp the coin earnage. They take away all these like certain like characters that have been in it previously and like stripped it down and then done all this like new groundwork to it to make it less fun. And to me, that's what, and I know it doesn't bother a lot of people, but for me, it bothers me on that level when I see a game treated like this. And it's there just, and sure, they need to make money, that I get, but there are so many better ways you can do it than to exploit an audience like that. Like it's like, what's the point of even playing the game when there's a $20 unlock everything DLC thing? It's like, what's the point? Like,
sure, like, yeah. I again, like, it's sort of like a gray area that again is kind of a new frontier. I mean, there's not really a direct comparison to another art form with this, right? I mean, yeah, that's true. I see what you're saying. Like, it's just weird. Like, it's just a matter of how much does it influence the game. Like, is Mortal Kombat X like an interesting game in and of itself anyway? You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Like, right.
And that's a whole nother conversation we could have as well. But I know you and I disagree on that at least. But
okay,
it's because I mean, even without all that stuff, I probably would like it a little bit more, but I don't think it's a good game even without that.
I like Mortal Kombat X a lot, so yeah.
But it's stuff like that when you start tinkering around with the gameplay in order to influence. It's like why I dislike mobile gaming so much, why I dislike free to play stuff, because I feel like they've ruined like a lot of the tactics that they use, like the whole your Candy Crushes of the world, where they like beat you into like psychological submission to pay money towards having a fun time. And sure. I think that psychological battering is your entry fee for playing a free game. And I don't like it. I think some are better than others, but there's that price.
But does that make Candy Crush a bad game?
It can if you feel like you're being harassed into spending money.
Well, couldn't I say the same thing about Disney and like the way
sure.
they basically turn their movies into like pop cultural currency, where feel like if you're not up to date, if you are missing out. Like you are not part of the culture if you're not watching the Avengers and Star Wars and whatever else the fuck they're doing.
I mean, I hate that mindset. I think it's terrible.
Right. I mean, they effectively create an atmosphere where you feel like it is important that you watch this movie. You know what I mean? I feel like it's just a different level of the same kind of thing. Yeah. But at the same time, that doesn't mean Rogue One is a bad movie.
No, God, no.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, I don't know. Yeah. Like, it's a gray area. Like, I don't think it affects the movies themselves. Mm-hmm. I think it's just it's not really a matter of art to me. It's just a matter of the companies and their business practices. And to be fair, I think what Disney is doing to art through those practices is awful. So like I can kind of see what you're saying on this.
But this is what excites and worries me about video games being this new frontier for entertainment. Right. Which I'm seeing the good and the bad. And of course I always try to, not promote the good, but I always try to like get the word out and stuff like that. It's why I'm passionate about it, because I feel like it could be treated better. And right now, I think most people, like I said, that have come in from the service industry and like all these other corporate structures, like don't see it as this new art form. They just see it as an udder that can be squeezed for money, and that I hate that. I hate that attitude. And like when
I wonder, like, I mean, with this happening to video games, are they ever going to be able to mature? You know what I mean? Like, are they ever going to be able to truly evolve anymore if everything is run by like things like EA?
Oh,
You
they
know what
could.
I mean?
Look at Titanfall 2. I think that is one of those rare cases where I think like EA wasn't allowed to really mess with that game because I think
I mean, they still managed to fuck it over in the end, but yeah.
Oh, did they?
I mean, with the way they released it, nobody fucking.
Oh,
played it.
well, yeah, oh god, yeah,
Yeah.
that I think like, but like the game itself, I think is like in the running for the best thing I've ever played. But it's like
I mean, I love Titanfall 2. I don't think Titanfall 2 is like the kind of, artistic achievement I'm interested in, but I just fucking love playing it.
yeah, it's I think like with like Titanfall 2, you can have those examples of something being released inside the corporate structure and having it be great, and I think Titanfall 2 is very like pro gamer, pro consumer friendly. It's very easy to pick up and play. There's not a lot of it doesn't ask a lot from you. It's really just there to be like, hey, there's a lot in this base package. There's a lot that you enjoy. Everything, like most of the stuff, like the big stuff that's coming out for it is free. Of course, you need an internet connection for it, but like a lot of the multiplayer stuff coming out is free. It's great. So it is possible to have it in this terrible corporate society for video games. It's possible. I've seen it. I have hope, but I think in most cases it's like.
Listening to you talk about it too, it's like, I mean, it's not that dissimilar. I mean, art exists within the corporate world and always will and always has for the most part. I mean, not always, but for a long time now.
Well, it's like when it's like older movies that have had their endings changed by the studios. Like I remember like a couple of the Planet of the Apes movies having that. What's another one?
I mean, there are tons. I mean, you cannot. I mean, in the Hollywood system in like the 50s and the 40s, I mean, you could not have an unhappy ending.
Oh yeah.
Ton. I mean, countless movies were affected by this.
Yeah.
But yeah. But they still succeed as art. Like like that's the thing. Like I feel like there's like a line here where it's like I don't want to just sound like someone who's out of touch with the realities of how video games are operating as a new art because I mean. I'm not necessarily cynical about movies being artistically successful in the corporate world. I mean, I tend to be of the opinion that independent movies are much more restricted and much less interesting than Hollywood movies for the most part right now at this moment. So I'm definitely not a believer in that. Like I see every year movies that I think are successful within the studio system. But it's just a matter of finding that balance. Like our game's going to find that balance. And I think I don't think it's so much that they're being funded by these like corporations. I just think we just need the right people at the helms creatively. And that's where I feel like we're missing out a lot because I'm not sure we've found many like interesting, unique voices in that world yet. Which is fine. Like it's still super new. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's going to be a while before I think people really catch on to what it can do and start making really great art, like artistic art experiences. And I mean, they exist, but they're very rare.
Yeah. They have to fight. They have to fight to survive being homogenized and like made into just every other game.
Yeah, and I mean, you have so many other so much more factors to deal with than you do with a movie in a lot of ways. Where I mean, you can't just make your artistic statement. You have to deal with interfaces and controls and frame rates and like this is stuff that is not the realm of. I think this is the kind of stuff that most like artists are not going to be interested in dealing with. Yeah. So I feel like that might be something that's limited to it right now. But I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I hope, and if I'm trying to tell myself not to be cynical about this kind of stuff, I'm sure we'll get somewhere. But it's just when there's such like a dearth of like really interesting games out there. It's like it becomes easy to be cynical when I feel like I can go months without playing anything that excites me.
That'd be like brutal for me because I'm always like almost like obsessively looking for cool stuff to play because like it's to me like video games are my poison in terms of trying to find things that I get. I mean, movies used to be like my my main source of like trying to find artistic fulfillment, things that like learning about myself and stuff like that. But it's recently just like gradually it's been going towards video games now. And I still love movies. I still love going out and watching movies and talking about them, but it's like video games have just kind of like stealthily taken over the forefront of my mind in terms of like constantly like art adding to my like something when something like Titanfall 2 comes out, which if you look at Titanfall 2, it's like oh, it's a robot game. You fight like big mechs and stuff like that. But like what Titanfall 2 has given to me as a player, as a person, I think dwarfs most movies I've ever seen.
That's how I felt about Mass Effect when I first played it, man. Yeah. That's still how I feel about the first 2 Mass Effects, and that's why I've always been on ever since. And I've been like, yes, I'm completely on board. Like, I mean, movies and music will always be my first love and my most intense love, but yeah, I mean, I'm on board with games as the new medium, the new frontier for art, and I'm totally down for it. And I just want somebody to fucking do something with it.
Yeah. Last thing I'll say about Telltale is I think your interactions with BT and Titanfall 2 are more interesting than any of the dialogue choices in most of the recent Telltale games. That's all I'm going to say, my last thing about Telltale.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Oh man, that last bit in Titanfall 2 and
I still have not finished the campaign for what it's worth.
Oh man. The last like finale just like makes me cry. It's beautiful. It's beautiful how they constructed that.
Nice.
So, top 5. Holy shit, over an hour. Apologies for
a long one.
The length, but it's
yeah. My top 5 did not change. This did not enter it.
Okay.
I have too many problems with the ending.
Sure. Just to save on time, this is going to be my number 2 now. And then my number 1 is still season 2, episode 3, which is the Carver episode.
I'm very surprised this beat the season 1 finale for you.
Yeah, it's because it's got more ways to end. Whereas like I love the ending to season 1. It's just how I can personalize it more in this one does it for me. I think it moves at a quicker pace too. It's like more stuff happens in it that I'd like to replay rather than season 1 finale.
Sure.
So Jordan, where can people find you?
Well, I am on Twitter at @5th_opinion.
And you can find me, Razorblade Mango on Twitter, Razorblade Mango on YouTube. Going to be talking about Drawn to Death and Persona 5. That's the big thing for this week. So, next time,
oh shit, we don't know what we're doing next time.
Yeah.
Do it.
Oh, okay. Well, final thoughts on this season, because I forgot to.
Oh fuck. Yes, wow. I didn't even realize we were this far.
Yeah.
Okay. Overall, despite my problems, I do think this is Telltale's best season of a game that I've played so far.
Yeah, I think it's the best one, easily the best one in terms that we've covered on this podcast. I'm not sure if it'll beat Tales of the Borderlands for me. I'm not sure.
That's not even in the running for me. I think
I need to replay it again.
I think this game does the most interesting things of any of their series and feels the most has the most potential. By the end, it's hard not to feel a little let down again like I've talked about, just the restrictions and the choices, but
yeah.
Overall, the overall experience and the things I take away from this in a positive sense are really interesting. I think this is the peak of Telltale doing interesting things, basically.
In most respects, I would agree. Next time, do we want to start with Tales from the Borderlands next time? Do you want to do Walking Dead Season 3? Or do you want to take a break from Walking Dead?
I think we have to do Borderlands. Okay. Like, we've talked about it so much. Like, I think we got to do it.
Okay, so I will... Next time, Tales from the Borderlands Episode 1 is what we'll get into.
All right.
Now I need to go... I've had that on my computer for months now. I can finally start playing it. So, awesome. All right, so thank you everyone for watching. If you like what you see, subscribe. And that'll be it for this time. See you guys next time.
See ya.